Remember the footage from the movie The Green Mile, where John Coffey was played by Michael Clark Duncan as a prisoner. His size at that time was amazing. Also, while watching the series Stranger Things, you could notice another big guy, Kai Green. I will remind you the photo where Kai looks 2 times bigger than average bodybuilder. And what do you think about the genetics of these African guys, Mr. Wad and Dovius?
The entire Olympia top is 90% dark-skinned, including the most legendary Lee Haney, Phil Heath and of course Ronnie Coleman.
But their genetics do not stop there. There are certainly many genetically gifted people in the world, but most of the representatives of unique genetics are observed on the African continent. The fastest man in the world is Usain Bolt. The tallest people are Watusi from Rwanda. The smallest are pygmies, and the list goes on endlessly. But today I suggest to emphasize our attention exactly on the muscle structure and dimensions of dark-skinned people. What is their secret and why do they so dominate over the others? Let's start with diversity. On the African continent, people differ from each other more than on the rest of the planet together, and this is an undeniable fact. This is actually a very important factor because skin color does not determine DNA, but the diversity of different types of genetics in Africa gives a high probability that among them there is a unique representative with propensity for a particular sport.
Natural selection also contributes to this. According to the journal Nature, in 2002, malaria has killed about 50 to 60 billion people throughout the history. That is about half of the people who ever lived on this planet, and most of them from Africa.
This is why dark-skinned people, for example, have less hemoglobin, which is normally a problem, but for regions with a high risk of malaria, it is more of an advantage. After all, mosquitoes, the vectors of malaria, insert a bacterium into the bloodstream that likes to inflect red blood cells. This natural selection makes people from Africa the most resistant to this disease. The same goes for their physical characteristics. Now here is the best part. Because of the low production of the red blood cells, dark-skinned people tend to have fewer slow muscle fibers, and therefore more fast muscle fibers. On the screen you can see the characteristics of each type.
Well, and of course one of the most important life hacks is so-called sport performance gene ACTNH3.
Yes, imagine, there is a gene, which is essentially a protein, responsible for power and strength. This gene in turn is divided into 2 more types of good and bad, so-called alleles R and X. The occurrence of these alleles will determine your predisposition to sports. Suppose you borrowed one R allele from mom and one R allele from dad, so you are RR genotype and have a high predisposition to strength sports. If you get one R allele from your dad and one X allele from your mom, this is also very good genetics. This can be compared to the photo of Kai Green in the first minutes of the video and the bodybuilder, who has also a great shape, but fades against of Kai. For simplicity of perception, we can imagine that he is a representative of combined genotype, and Kai Green is an outstanding representative of unique genetics. But there is also a type XX, when both alleles from your mom and dad you have X. In this case, it will be several times more difficult for you to achieve similar results in sports than for the first 2 genotypes, and your maximum possible potential will be much lower.
Interestingly, for example, in Asia, XX genotype was found in 25% of population. For example, Caucasians with such genes are 18%, as well as the majority of white-skinned population of the world. But when it comes to black people, only 1% of them have XX genotype.
Just so you understand, there is not a single member of speed and power sport in the world who does not have at least one R allele in their genotype. That's how important it is. Therefore, when it comes to genetics and especially the phrase "work always take precedence over genetics," according to the information I just mentioned, unfortunately does not testify in favor of this inference. However, no one has cancelled the fact of training either. At this point, I want to show you an excerpt from our video with an athlete named Dovius from Africa.
But some people think that, oh, if I look like this and I've never in my lifetime taken supplement, not even protein shake or protein powder, none of that stuff, then they begin to think, okay, maybe you're doing steroids. I'm in Ghana, okay, West Africa, I don't know where they sell those shit. And even if I know, I don't give a fuck about it. You see how I look? And I'm not trying to sound cocky or anything, but I'm African. I have good genetics, and I'm not lazy. When it comes to working out, I'm not chickening out. I've trained with people that think that, oh, maybe all this Dovius thing is a hype. But then when I train with them, 10 minutes in, they're done. because they don't train like I train.
And of course, talking about genetics, I cannot ignore topic about myostatin, a protein that essentially blocks muscle growth, preventing them from growing indefinitely.
Myostatin is influenced by our lifestyle, environment, how we eat, how active our lifestyle is in general, whether strength training is present, and the presence or absence of bad habits. Lifestyles in certain regions of Africa have contributed to mutations of this protein. For example, in Belgian blue cows, myostatin has also mutated by accident. So if you wanted to see a vegan natural bodybuilder with a lot of muscle mass, there it is. It's worth keeping in mind that there are genetic unicums, especially among black people, who can really naturally achieve the same results as less gifted athletes on pharmacology. Look for example at pictures of Lee Priest at 12 years old or Kai Green at 17 years old. Again, fresh research from 2022 confirms the fact that dark-skinned people, specifically African Americans, have mutations in this gene much more frequently than other nationalities. Did you think that this is the end of our differences? No, there are more than you think. The color of our skin is the same genetic difference, which is simply not relevant to the subject of this video, so we do not deal with it, as well as all other differences, of which there are plenty. But the so-called sport genetics does not end with the above-mentioned features. Androgen receptor sensitivity and testosterone levels are also higher in black men. Free testosterone is on average 2.5 to 4.9% higher, which may not be much, but again, we are talking about averages and the combination of these differences with the above-mentioned. Now about androgen receptors. In simple terms, they will affect how well your free testosterone will work, both naturally produced and when administered externally. These receptors can be determined by biological analysis of IR, which has been done in a number of studies. As you may have guessed, dark-skinned men have a higher sensitivity to androgen receptors. For the same reason, dark-skinned people are more likely to get prostate cancer. And these are of course the disadvantages of such genetics feature. But speaking of muscle mass, they again get an advantage.
But whatever, you shouldn't blame your genetics even if it's not perfect. Better watch this video to find out what is perfect genetics and how it is perceived by others. And with you as always was Fyodor Chepki. See ya!